This is Tell Me Exactly. I'm your host, Meridith Jensen. And joining me today is Gary Galasso, and he's going to be talking all about dispatch life support. Welcome, Gary.
Hi, Meredith. Glad to be with you again.
Thanks. Yeah. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and why you're here today?
All right. Well, I have an extensive work history with EMS and fire, spanning 37 years. And my agency, the City of San Jose Fire Department, brought on medical and fire protocol. I was more or less the person that brought in the training and got our dispatchers coordinated to that. So it's with that I finished my career about 12 years ago in helping agencies implement protocol now. I'm called a protocol expert. So with teaching protocol for over 2 decades, it gives me the opportunity to share that with people that we train. So this topic is awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get right to it. Tell us a little bit about kind of the history or what dispatch life support is all about. Of course, we use acronyms in the world of dispatch. So oftentimes we refer to this as DLS, but tell me what that is.
Yes, we use that term, and even for those out there that take an exam know the acronym very well. They learn it by hook or crook, but the idea behind that is that we have dispatch life support, which amazingly comes from the realm of emergency medical services. And we look at scope of practices. And so when we look at pre-hospital care, for example, we have basically 2 categories. You have basic life support, which actually starts with CPR training and moves on to where you start initiating invasive procedures. And then you have advanced life support, which is invasive procedures and all the procedures leading up to and including what physicians do.
Right.
So when protocol was produced in the evolution of its development, Dr. Clausen decided we need a scope of practice. And so we have basic life support, advanced life support, and now communications was going to do dispatch life support. That basically means it's totally by auditory cues that I give care. And that's what's amazing about it. So we're going to talk about some good things and bad things about that process as we go along. But I want to let you know that when we brought on police and fire, we use the same term. And for those of us that worked emergency services, the medical side, fire side, we thought, how would dispatch life support apply to these 2 new disciplines? And it very much does. When
Absolutely.
you think about it.
We know it does. Yeah.
Yep. And it's the idea of protecting life and preventing the emergency from getting larger and stabilizing the scene when you look at fire and police events. So dispatch life support is pretty much universal. But for those of us in the emergency medical services, it was kind of paused us for a moment as we saw the application in police and fire.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can understand that. But I think we can all imagine and understand the scene safety implications for any fire or police situation. Yeah. So to be able to, walk someone through any kind of instructions over the phone to, number one, keep themselves safe so that they can continue to give us information. And then also, of course, keep themselves safe until, responders arrive.
Right.
But yeah, some of the other things that they can be doing while they're waiting for the responders. So essentially, DLS breaks down into 2 smaller subcategories. Talk to us about the difference between those.
Correct. Well, there's instructions on every chief complaint, medical, fire, and police, and also case entry for those 3 disciplines. And they're known as post-dispatch instructions. So in the realm where you're dispatching out an echo, for example, in case entry, you have instructions right away that you give them. And that falls in the realm of giving care. Now, we know from the academy point of view, as far as PDIs in case entry, they actually fall into the category of scoring and pre-arrival instructions, and we'll talk about that. But basically, post-dispatch instructions are basically assigned to every chief complaint, and they're basically the do's and don'ts of what dispatchers should tell the caller over the phone of what they can do and not do over the instructions. So that's included with that. Now, the other category is called pre-arrival instructions. Now, I say this because we're missing one big category of post-dispatch instructions called exit protocol. And actually, exit protocol falls into the category of post-dispatch instructions, and where we're signing off with a caller. And, medical, we control bleeding and do a lot more things on that as well. But the other discipline or bobcat protocol aspect of it is actually pre-arrival instructions. Now, you mentioned that before. Instructions we give until the responders arrive. So when we look at the aspect of those two, the immediacy of post-dispatch instructions is the do's and don'ts and caring for the initial instructions for the caller. The pre-arrival instructions are those going to give until we arrive on scene.
Right. The thing about case exit instructions, probably the most common ones that we're using, right, on most of our calls are going to be just those normal kind of case exit. Before I let you go, do these things and don't do these other things. I call them the pets, pills, and porch lights, right? Put away pets, gather medications, turn on the outside light.
True. And for fire and police, it's more or less how to keep the caller safe.
Yeah.
And also to not basically direct them into the area where it might not be safe and keep them safe from hazards and things like that. So, and again, includes the idea, please call us back if anything else occurs or immediately further instructions.
Right. Yeah. A lot more don'ts on the fire and police.
Yep.
Don't go to anything dangerous. Don't move any patients. Don't go near any hazards. Yeah.
That's true.
Don't go back in for any reason, right? Those
That's true.
Don't try to put the fire out.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about kind of why these are so important in the pre-hospital environment, right? We've called 911. We've got responders coming to the scene as appropriately and safely as they can.
Yeah.
Why do these instructions play such a pivotal role?
Well, the idea, and this is so wonderful about this, that all of our people that go through EMD training learn that they are the first responders.
Yeah.
In my day when I started, most calls were coming in on landlines, phone attached to the wall, so the person actually wasn't with the patient needing help. For the medical end of it, it's wonderful to have that phone right next to the patient and be able to give care immediately. So we were starting CPR way early, and we've given a lot of information through the college and through the courses to let people know that we actually start this life-saving actions immediately and not waste any time, because we know with every minute that passes, the possibility of that person surviving that decreases more. So it's really important the intervention occurs for that.
Yeah, for sudden cardiac arrest, the risk of survival decreases by 10% for every minute, right?
Correct.
Something like that, yeah.
You did good on that.
So, yeah, I mean, whether you're in a rural area where it may take a little while for the responders to get to you, even when they're coming lights and sirens and hot and going as quickly as they can just for drive time, or whether you're in a more urban area where a response time is very quick, maybe just a minute or two, these instructions are still important, right? Because we are the ones on the phone with them the entire time.
Absolutely.
From start to
You
finish.
Look at situations with childbirth, for example, or control of bleeding. You only got so much blood in your body. We've got to be able to stop that bleeding right away. So those things are so life-saving and so beneficial.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of the inception of these instructions. And I'm sure back when they were first invented long ago, there was probably a bit of a challenge to understand or to really kind of make sure that when we're designing these instructions that they are going to be able to be carried out by someone that's completely, in most cases, untrained and doesn't speak the language of, EMS or even police or fire. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, that's what's so amazing about this protocol. In fact, I'm going to bring a little perception that I have over the years of how pre-hospital care workers are pretty frustrated with the idea that the academy is maybe 2 or even 3 years behind the standard that changes in American Heart Association. Well, guess what? It takes time to test out the auditory presentation to make sure the caller understand these. So you can imagine these blind, if you will, testing occur on how we give instructions is successful on that end. And it goes back to the point, for example, when you open an airway, we're looking at circa 1970 of putting the hand on the forehead, underneath the neck, and tilting the head back to open the airway, because that is the most reliable way to open the airway. We're explaining the skills that we use in pre-hospital care doesn't work. We try to do it in a blind environment. So that is what's so important about this process. So when we look at the beginning, we look at making sure the instructions over the phone are understood by the caller and make sure it's successful before we ever put them out is released to the agency. So make sure it works. So even now, it took us time for compressions only and things like that agencies want to get that on board right away. We didn't make sure in our environment it was going to be successful in that. So you just got to be patient as we see standards change, but we make sure it works by auditory cue, and therefore it becomes a dispatch life support scope.
Yeah. I mean, we're going in, I think I've said this multiple times, even on this podcast, right? How we're going in blindfolded with our hands tied behind our back, essentially, as
great example.
Dispatchers. We can't touch anything. We can't even see anything. So the questioning becomes critically important to make sure that we understand what's happening, because we're relying on the caller to paint the picture for us of what's happening with this patient. And then we can't touch anything. So then our voice is the only power we have to tell them how to save a life.
It's so important that you brought that up, because the very aspect of check boxes, and I think if you're a paramedic or EMT physician or nurse out there, you understand the fact that you have to make sure you go over your standard for assessment, standard for care. And in the environment where you got the patient in front of you, that's pretty easy to assure that you're doing those things. In the issue where I'm not seeing the patient or I'm in auditory cues, the only way I can make sure that I catch everything in my assessment, the only thing to make sure I'm catching everything I can do as far as instruction is by following the protocol.
Right. And so then talk to me, I know you've been teaching EMD for a long, long time. Talk to me a little bit about maybe some challenges you've seen over the years with student learners in your EMD course that come into this with different levels of experience and training. Is that a struggle for them?
Well, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Even my agency back in the 90s were saying, maybe we should send our people to EMT training first. Now, what's great about this is to get a better understanding of the medical background, if you will, on the care we give or the instructions that we give. So that's good. We have agencies, obviously, that have nurses in dispatch center. We have actually agencies that have doctors in the dispatch center. So you have these wonderful qualified people who totally understand what we're doing. The problem is, are they staying in their lane?
Right.
If they're ALS, can they stay in their lane for dispatch life support? If they're BLS, can they stay in their lane for base life support? I've seen it be very successful to have somebody be so sharp in the comm center and be very confident in what they're giving because they understand the background from the field perspective. But I've seen also people saying, my instructions could be much more beneficial than DLS. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And already they're outside the scope.
Right.
And obviously now they're putting not only their agency into liability because not following the standards of dispatch life support as far as care, but also it's putting the medical director's license under scrutiny as well if something goes wrong. So it's very important to stay within your scope.
And the risk to that patient, because I think the problem is that you're speaking to someone most of the time, a caller who doesn't have that level of training. So even if you do as the dispatcher, your caller just doesn't. And again, to your earlier point, you can't see anything to confirm that it's being done the way you're explaining. So that's where our instructions, tested, tried, true, are always going to kind of be the right scope there.
You know, and that's something we have to be reminded as we talk about topics like this, the fact it's all about the patient. It's all about caring for them, giving them the best care, and helping them the most we can. And this is what we're proven by standards within the academy, is that everything we're doing meets the standard, has stood the test of time, is unchallengeable for 44 years.
Right.
Yeah. All about patient care. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about dispatchers on the other end of the scope. So we spoke about dispatchers that come into this with some training in the field. What about somebody that comes in right off the street, never having done this? I mean, that was my experience. I came into this from working at an elementary school in the school nurse's office. I had never done anything in dispatch before. What advice would you have for those students in terms of kind of understanding this whole concept of dispatch life support?
They're going to get it in EMD training. And there's a double-edged sword with new people as well. Number one, and this is from the comm center manager point of view as far as the people inside the center as well, it's a blank canvas. There's no bad habits. There's
I
no
love
we
it.
did this previously or we did that previously, and actually moving away from a standard of care. So that's the good side of it. The bad side of it is the fact that they're going to get all this training, and it's going to come at them very quickly and in high amounts during their 3-day EMD training. But the understanding by them that it's less than 3% of their call volume for any specific chief complaint, whether it's child delivery or it is CPR or tourniquet application or what have you, it's a self-made skill. So the problem is that you can't retain the familiarity with that particular discipline unless you touch it occasionally.
Right.
Unless you do, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely found that was my experience. I mean, coming into this from a completely kind of unrelated field, I was soaking everything up as like a sponge and just kind of really found my niche, quickly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I bet you were doing really good too, because we love people come in from a different area of occupation coming into this because it really is fresh for them and it sticks better.
Yeah, I often talk about how important it is to have the right attitude and some of those like less tangible skills as a dispatcher, because that's the stuff that you can't train.
Yep.
This stuff that we're talking about can be trained. And to your point, as long as you're exercising that muscle memory once in a while, you're going to retain it. But yeah.
It's something too, as I must mention, because I'll sell this all the time. You are a big seller as well. I know Meridith is the college. We have great opportunity to go into topics specific to pre-arrival instructions that will help them have a better understanding of these things. The latest one that I saw was the tourniquet application. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that will help that new learner, that person, understand real life on what they're dealing with. There's got to be application in it. We only can do so much in a certification class, and obviously we've got a lot coming at them.
Right.
But when they take the time on their own, the self-paced courses are just amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think we do a really good job of with, whether it's the self-paced kind of focused CDE trainings or even in the EMD course or the software training courses, I think we do a really good job of connecting the whys behind, because I think that as, dispatchers, whether you're coming into this from a totally unrelated field or it's been in your blood since you were born, knowing the why is really what makes a difference to help retain it and really sharpen those skills. If you can connect that why in your brain, you're just going to be that much better at it, I think.
Yeah, too. And as you use it more, and all the years you have in the center is the fact you get some of the why as you process and your experience out there and hear the feedback from your Q or what have you on how it does work and why it does work that way. So it helps.
Yeah, because I think, if you come into this job not having any experience other than, maybe I've seen some things on TV. I've watched Grey's Anatomy, I've seen ER. I've seen the movies where they do these types of things. I can imagine it would be quite terrifying to have to sit down and take your first CPR call where you're walking someone through how to do those things that you saw on TV. But then having the realization that you've got this tried and true protocol in front of you that's tested and it works and there's tons of research and study behind it. I just, for me personally, I can remember feeling a huge relief after that first call because, I was scared going into it. The movies make it scary. But then when it really happened and, either it worked or it didn't, the instructions themselves worked. The process worked. The outcome later on, that's out of my hands. But having the system in place made me feel more confident to go forward and keep doing it.
Isn't it great? You don't have to think of this stuff off the top of your head,
Yes.
right? But what I'd like to go and encourage people to do is get ahead of it. Don't be surprised. Don't sit there and say, well, I know the CPR instructions are there. All I need to do is go to that. No. Be familiar with it. Be familiar with the attributes to that particular protocol. For example, if you can't get somebody out of the chair, those instructions are in CPR.
Right.
You can't get them to roll over on their back. Those instructions are in there. And if you don't know they're there in software, you won't access them readily in
That's right.
the if you will, in the moment where you're pressured because of the situation or whatever. So I'm going back to, I'm sorry I'm hammering this a little bit, but
Drills. I knew you were going there.
Drill, and as you know, on the rack, we have those practice scenarios that are appropriate for ProQA. If you have AI Skill Lab, that's also awesome. So touch the pre-arrival instructions at least once every 3 months. Do some scenarios so you're not surprised when you go there. It's good to have them there, but unless you're familiar with it, you won't know, and you may stiffen up on different aspects you need to be aware of as you go through that protocol.
Love it. So that's definitely advice for the actual dispatcher sitting in the chair for how to sharpen their skills and retain their skills and get better at DLS instructions. What about leadership? What advice would you have for leaders in these centers in terms of, dispatch life support?
Well, obviously making sure your dispatchers get the opportunity to go through the EMD training, make sure they're trained on the most recent version they have in their center, and make sure they get a lot of practice. Yeah, how do you make way for that? The manager's got to understand, I've got my schedule, I got to worry about overtime, I've got to be concerned about who I can couple this person up with in order to do the practice scenarios, how to make time for that. And it's tough in a time-starved environment or environment where staffing's low. It's really tough. But to recognize the value and the importance of doing it in a minimum amount of time can't be overstated.
Yeah.
And I think this is the issue that they have to understand. Also, quality improvement programs where you can see if a dispatcher is struggling, spend some time with them, give them the opportunity to do those things, either the college or practice scenarios to get their skills built up, because everybody's nervous when they come into these calls. There's no doubt. How do you get over the nervousness? By being familiar with it and being comfortable with it by doing it often enough.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I think another important element is the oversight, right? Quality assurance is kind of where that starts. But even higher than that, dispatch reviews, dispatch steering for leaders, how can they, engage with those groups to make sure that this is, staying on track? Yeah.
Make the challenges or the missteps in pre-arrival instructions presentation in the practice environment, so when you got the real game going on, you're doing it correctly.
Yeah, that muscle memory.
Yes.
Can't stress it enough,
Not
right?
enough.
We talk about that in our CPR course.
Yep.
The importance of, building that muscle memory so that your brain, we're not trying to create robots here, right? Yeah. What we're trying to do is allow for your brain to focus on all of the other things that it needs to be doing that are critical for that scene, and for, listening to the caller and capturing their responses and things like that. So if you've done all of these drills and these practices over and over and over again, your brain has to do less of a heavy lift to think about what to say next. It's in front of you. It knows to just automatically say it, right? Mm-hmm. What other tips would you have for anybody that's maybe a former field responder? Again, EMTs, we're talking a lot about medical, but what about fire and police?
Yeah, well, you know what? I really love the support, if it can be done, sit-alongs and ride-alongs, okay? You just can't give enough importance to have a firefighter, a nurse, or a doctor, or a police officer sit in the comm center and work what they do for a whole shift to see what they're under, so they understand what the stress the dispatcher is under on that, as well as ride-alongs, so the dispatcher gets out there and connects the dots, what they're telling me over the phone and what they're seeing on scene and what we have to deal with in the field. So I think that helps a lot. But I'll go back to the idea because they are EMTs, paramedics, and nurses and doctors, doesn't mean they know this protocol. So I have to go back to saying, what about drills? What about reviews? What about taking some college courses to understand the scope of how that particular pre-arrival instructions applies and the level of DLS and applies to them, so they can understand what needs to be done.
One of the other, I think, really maybe untapped resources for helping people sharpen their skills, what about also encouraging them to be presenting it to others? That's one thing that when I visit agencies, if I've got some people that you can tell they get it, right? Giving them the opportunity to get out there and present this stuff to others, whether it's in the community with public education or at any one of the various conferences, public safety conferences, and speaking on these topics that they're, compassionate about. I think the opportunity to teach someone else about it also really is going to help that.
Oh,
core
yes, absolutely.
knowledge.
And giving them a topic, even the center, to teach their peers would be a wonderful
love it.
opportunity. And let's go beyond that. Let's talk about feeding them in general. Go to the symposiums, go to Navigator, go to the Compass events, learn more about what they're doing. We'll never learn enough. We'll never learn it all.
Right.
I don't care if you're a dispatcher, a paramedic, or EMT, you'll never learn it all. You can always take a deeper dive on these topics, and that's what's so wonderful about this. So encouragement for that may give even more excitement about their job.
So one last thing to just kind of wrap it up, Gary. How often are these things looked at and updated?
As far as standards, as you may know, we have council standards for every discipline, including emergency communication nurse systems. So they're constantly getting input. And I have to say, from the realm of medical and fire, which I'm involved with, and I have to say police, about, it's constant input. So protocol is always improving. It's always changing. So we're seeing in olden days where we saw updates come every 2 or 3 years, maybe, and that's quick sometimes because the academy is only one, and they have to work 3 disciplines to get them progress through and go through logic and do all those things. But I got to tell you right now, with us putting out updates twice a year in the spring and fall, we're seeing those changes incrementally occur. So we're seeing the improvement as if something comes up, and if it's immediate and life-threatening, it happens right now.
We saw some examples of that at the onset of COVID,
Yes.
right, where we were able to make changes at lightning speed that we've never done before to
absolutely.
get things in the hands of dispatchers that needed it.
Yes, and I hope that we look at our standards that way. I got to tell you, with all the updates since the release of 14 and 23, that Council of Standards for Medical is unbelievable in making changes and improvements on it in all areas, especially in pre-arrival instructions. It's pretty spectacular.
Anything else that I forgot, Gary, that you want to put out there to our listeners as a message regarding dispatch life support?
Well, all I can say is this, is never stop practicing. When you look at, and I encourage my students this when I teach an EMD course, is that look at the seldom used skills. Many of you have researched and heard presentations by a gentleman by the name of Gordon Graham. And all I'm going to do is drop his name and let you look it up. But it's those low-frequency, high-risk events that can put us under the most stress and have the most risk. So when you look at situations in the pre-arrival instructions, in medical even, now that we have active shooter, there's one that a dispatcher will say, I'll never get this, but you can't guarantee me you won't. Right. Same thing with first-party sinking vehicle. Same thing with the aspect of even electrocution as far as care and DLS instructions. But you look at stuck accelerator, those things. Besides,
person on fire,
Oh yeah, and then tourniquet, all those things. How often are you going to be able to deal with that? That's the issue. And if you can't say I'm going to get this call this year, then you should be practicing that. That will give you more comfort. You make more comfortable when you get this call. You will be more at ease about it and going through it, and you won't be surprised by it. And guess what? That's the best benefit to the patient. Right. Best benefit to responders, and obviously best benefit for yourself as an EMD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stay sharp out there, right? And practice,
seldom used skills.
Practice.
You bet.
I love it. Gary, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
And we'll have you back again.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Meridith. It's been good talking to you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to let us know what you liked. And subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Look for @TellMeExactly to get the latest on all things emergency communications. Tell Me Exactly is a Priority Dispatch Corporation podcast developed by our team of protocol experts and hosted by me, Meridith Jensen, with Cody Ekman as producer, Reading Roberts as sound engineer, Scott Robinson and Jason Barber as executive producers.